we are like in the best time in India, the best time to build in India, and the world wants us.
You want to be the deciding party rather than letting Facebook or Instagram or Google be the deciding.
Because we feel there's a conflict of interest.
Who are you, Sharad?
We basically built a platform for people to put ads in newspapers in the country through an online platform.
You're saying in 9 months, you've gotten 500 D2C brands on your platform and you have data for 6 million out of the 10 million customers?
As an entrepreneur, one of those things is how do you make yourself redundant and what do you think will cannibalize your business? Can we leverage information to make advertising more relevant to you? Can we make this process so simple that a consumer who wants to place an ad can self-serve himself through the platform? And the interesting part was we were doing it in a sector which people consider dead.
Udani Infra, we will charge you.
Washing powder in Nema. Why do you remember it? We overestimate the short term and we underestimate the long term. In today's generation, what is really happening is we all, are enamored by what we call as AI or data, particularly leveraging data for making things more relevant for people. And I'm more fascinated about making ads more relevant for people or showing the right ads to the right people. And that's sort of been my life journey in making advertising more efficient now with leveraging data. So that's what we are here to talk about.
What do you mean? I didn't understand. What do you mean by leveraging more data? What do you mean by the word needs?
So we've all seen this movie, I don't know if you remember, Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is walking down the road. And as he's walking down on this left, based on his profile, he's starting seeing ads based on what he's interested in, what he's liked. If he goes into a car, he's seeing some, at the time of maybe sitting in the car, whatever he needs at that moment, sort of showing up to him. All that is driven, we would think at that time it was sci-fi, right? But now, over these years, each of our transactions or anything that we do is all digital. It's being tracked digitally. And there are two ways of it, right? One way is around thinking, okay, is my data being private? Am I actually being monitored? Or can it be leveraged to make my life much more simpler? Or for example, because I've been in the ads domain, can we leverage information to make advertising more relevant to you, right? If all that matters, if I'm interested in something and I see that at the right moment, at the right time, it's probably something which I wish I had actually already seen. Advertising becomes much more effective. Think of it like Google search. Do we ever question what is ads on Google search? Because they're exactly relevant to what we are searching for. And if we are searching for that, that's exactly what we want. And we'd rather have that ad than not have it. But how would you transfer that in the open world?
I think there is where the problem sort of comes up, is that we're okay with Google search because we have put in those specific terms. We're saying we want to see a house in Vermont or we want flight tickets to London.
Yeah.
So you were okay with that. However, but when you're talking about that and suddenly your Instagram starts showing you recommendations for London and your something else shows you some other aspect of it, I think that's where it becomes scary.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I've been using Blue Smart here in Delhi.
Yeah.
And every third ad I see is Blue Smart now.
Yeah. So a very thin line between what we call as privacy and what we call as personalization. What is very interesting is, first, as long as those ads are targeted to you as an individual without knowing exactly who you are, but rather what you're interested in, it's still anonymous. Meaning that, think of it from a perspective of if those ads were not targeted to you, right, then the world would be totally different. I mean, let's not even think about ads. Think of it from like a Netflix recommendation engine. Today, when you open Netflix, automatically it shows you what it thinks you are most interested in to watch. That has also been driven by data. It's actually been driven by what it knows about you that you've been watching so far, and given your watch history, what are you likely to be watching next, right? That's the recommendation engine. If I give you the option of not using that, probably your Netflix experience would be totally different. Or for that matter, your Instagram feed, right? I mean, think of it from a feed perspective. We are actually shown content based on what we are interested in. You remember this rabbit hole which we all fall under because we like something and we keep on getting same content again and again, and it's like a rabbit hole we never stop. But that's driven by pure recommendation. Now, the idea is, while there is a thin line between, am I being tracked to the point that is it actually scary versus am I being tracked to make my life simpler? That's a call which even like new governments will take from a regulation perspective to make sure data is still anonymized so that it's not going to haunt you. But in all honesty, right? Technology is something to make life simpler for someone, and that's what will also happen in advertising. And hopefully, that's what we want to build around.
Yeah, I wanna traverse the thin line again. There's a difference between knowing and understanding that my data is being tracked and I'm getting these recommendations based on my data. There's a difference between thinking that all of this is magic, and there's a difference between just being nonchalant about it, being like, I don't care, I don't know, right? When companies start misusing this, I feel that can be very dangerous, especially in the time of credit, in the time of people buy now, pay later. So this can put people in a hole that they might not be able to recover from. Especially, for example, in the US, you will have educational ads in which, are you going to university? Are you going to university? Oh, we have this university, and that's $100,000 loan that you're going to put on your head. What do you think about that?
So two things. See, one is for the thin line, that's where actually regulation or government comes in, right? To say this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, right? Or these types of ads in these categories are acceptable. Like what you gave an example for education, a bigger example is political ads, right? Like people could literally be identified at one point based on their biases on which party they're likely to vote for or vote against, and then use that to sort of influence them otherwise, right? And what happens is over time, as in when governments become more cognizant of all of this, there will be regulation to sort of prevent any of mishandling, right? Even from a finance perspective, let's just say for buy now, pay later, or for education. But no, see, but the technology is always a double-edged sword, right? If anything you do excess of, it's a detriment, right? But that does not mean the other alternative is nothing. Does that make sense? Because we all moving or leveraging technology to move to a better place than what we were. Like imagine life without Instagram or without Facebook. Well, would you prefer that, or would you prefer this? But yes, is that the right end point? No, not really. But it's maybe definitely better than where we started at. Question. But yeah, this moves more into philosophy, to be honest. But I mean, as business, we are all about like solving problems, right? And then when you find your life's calling, then what is marketing and advertising? Marketing and advertising is basically helping people discover what they need at the right moment and hopefully convincing them with the right message. And if you sort of make that match, things happen. So in every little way, we feel this is powerful for any business.
Going back to the whole Netflix, Instagram example that we were talking about, Netflix also bases its things on what you have watched on Netflix.
Yes.
It's not looking at your YouTube history. It's not looking at your Amazon Prime Video history. It's not looking at your Hotstar history.
Yeah.
It's looking at your Netflix history. So again, I feel like there is a certain line there which you are comfortable with saying that, okay, I am on your website and you are tracking my data while I am on your website.
So Netflix, by the way, recognitions are based on what is happening on Netflix, correctly?
Exclusively?
For Netflix right now, yes. But for example, when you see anything on Facebook or when you see anything on Google, that is driven by your activity throughout the internet.
Yeah.
That's not only in one application, it's throughout. But however, that being said, there's a power of that, right? Like think of it like from your credit score. If your credit score was just decided by one company in which you decided to take a credit card from and you decide to default, as opposed to however many credit cards you've taken from however many companies, your credit score is a sum of all of that, right? And then the other new company which is deciding to give you credit will decide based on your behavior across the network, right? So there's the power of the network. Sure, in some instances, if Netflix as an app is large enough to have that intelligence by itself, recognition again might be simpler, right? But there are cases where the leveraging the power of the network makes things much more simpler and faster. To be honest, Netflix was able to achieve this after it's gotten critical mass, both on the user side, in terms of number of users seeing Netflix, and the content side, meaning that it has enough content in its capacity to allow you to recommend within its own ecosystem. And every time, when you think of businesses, especially when you're starting one, you want to join a network which can help you amplify itself, right?
Who are you, Sharad? Why do you care? Why is this your calling?
Okay, so I'm basically been in advertising for around from 2008. My life has revolved around, like I said, making advertising efficient. I started a company in 2008 called ReleaseMyAd. The idea behind ReleaseMyAd was pretty simple. I moved back to India, and print, as you all know it, while we would be declining in the West or in a developed market, in India it was thriving, right? And specifically vernacular. And the idea then was that to give an ad in a print newspaper, it was inconvenient. And if you think of ads in newspapers, we're not just talking about ads which are on the front page or the back page. The newspapers, by definition, really grew up with the type of ad which we call as classifieds, which are also taken out by individuals and small businesses. Think of it like a matrimonial, a property, recruitment, public notice. To give all these ads, it was really hard for someone. Maybe you had to go visit an office or you had to go to the newspaper center. And our entire thesis around when we started, right? Because when you start off, you're naive and foolish, but you're also willing to explore something which you have not thought about, right? And we were like, why not? And we said, let's aggregate all these newspapers in one platform. I mean, at that time, MakeMyTrip was just starting up. 2001, 2000, MakeMyTrip, we started this in 2008. We're like, if this can happen for travel, why can't it happen for advertising? So we basically built a platform for people to put ads in newspapers in the country through an online platform. And that's what we call as ReleaseMyAd. So yeah, that's how we started. Over these years, ReleaseMyAd is now pretty much India's largest newspaper ad booking platform. So if you think of any ad, be it an obituary, matrimonial, news, or property, all of those ads pretty much which you see in newspaper are powered by us. That's a long journey, which is I've bootstrapped over pretty much 10, 15 years now. And through that journey, we've always evaluated as and when we scale newspaper advertising, what next, right? As in when you make one medium more efficient in advertising, which other medium should we sort of move on to? The question has always been looming in my mind. As an entrepreneur, one of those things is how do you make yourself redundant? And what do you think will cannibalize your business? You'd rather want to invest in that moving forward, right? So Steve Jobs has this beautiful quote. He was like, we built the iPod Nano because and it was like this music device, and then which was like really successful. iPod. I mean, I was a big fan, and we would all have these iPods, and we would all go on these campuses and carry them. And the biggest competitor to the iPod was the iPhone. And at that time, Steve Jobs said, if we do not cannibalize ourselves, someone else will, right? And when you realize that, while you build one business as an entrepreneur, you're always looking on what other channels to build around. And so that's what we're now focusing on the digital side beyond ReleaseMyAd.
This whole, I don't think I'm old enough to know about newspaper ads at all. Because I am not one of the consumers of newspapers, but
me neither. But yes,
I do remember this like coming on the radio and stuff. Like check out this in the classified section or something like that. But what was the process before ReleaseMyAd came about, and what did you make it to be?
So ReleaseMyAd is a classic marketplace. Like, and whenever we build startups, right, we think about like what type of business can we build. One of those very common businesses or type of business is a marketplace. What do I mean by marketplace? Marketplace, we all think of Amazon is a marketplace, right? There's buyers and sellers, right? And the interesting part of a marketplace is there are certain common characteristics which make a marketplace very efficient, or the need of a marketplace very apparent. Meaning that if there are a lot of buyers and there are a lot of sellers, then it makes sense for a place for them to meet together, right? If there is only one seller and so many buyers, maybe you don't need a marketplace, right? So wherever there's a fragmentation of supply and a fragmentation of demand, a marketplace makes sense. So, because to answer your question, what happened prior to ReleaseMyAd, India pretty much has a leading newspaper, which is in English and in vernacular in every state. So every state would have their own vernacular newspaper, and every state would have one leading English newspaper, right? And given the number of states in India, in all total, now newspapers functioning in India would be around 400. And every newspaper was powerful in the region that they operated in, because the newspaper was built on the might of distribution. Today on the internet age, right, we think of distribution as natural. We go on YouTube, we are all live, we are distributed everywhere in wherever YouTube is accessible, which is pretty much anywhere. At that time, when print came out, the one who controlled the printing press, the one who printed the newspaper, controlled the distribution. So, which is why newspapers became a very regional business, meaning that in Delhi you will have Hindustan Times, and over time Times of India became very popular. In Calcutta, we have the Telegraph, which is the most popular English newspaper, or the Anand Bajar Patrika, which is a Bengal newspaper. In Bangalore, you have Deccan Herald, which is an English newspaper for Karnataka, or you have Vijay Karnataka, which is like a Kannada newspaper. So effectively, every state had its own leading newspaper, which is in English or in vernacular. And if you aggregate that across all cities, there are enough newspapers which are fragmented. Now, the process of giving an ad in these newspapers isn't that simple. Why so? Maybe you are Pepsi and you want to spend a few crore rupees. Sure, you'll have 20 people coming knocking on your door to try to sort of, please give me an ad in my newspaper. But if you're an individual who wants to give an ad maybe for your daughter's marriage for matrimonial, right? Or if someone in your family passed away, you have no idea how to give an obituary ad to announce to the people in the city for, let's say, a better, which is going to happen. You would probably have to go to the newspaper's office. Or at that time, they would actually have these classified booking agents, which would also be mom and pop stores, also having another, let's say, desk to accept these classified advertisements. So the process was tedious. The same way maybe 20 years ago, booking an airline ticket was, or booking a railway ticket was, right? You would have to stand in line, figure out. And forget tedious, if you're in city of Delhi and you want to give an ad in the city of Kolkata for, let's say, selling out a property or buying a property, or the ticket size that you're wanting, maybe a 2,000 rupee classified text ad, no one's there to help you because it's so small that there's no service which is out there which can profitably solve your problem to give you an ad in another city, because the newspaper is not going to have an office in every city in the country because they're very regionally centered, right? So ReleaseMyAd was all about solving these problems in the marketplace. Fragmented supply, too many newspapers. Fragmented demand, buyers are all over India, want to give ads in multiple newspapers. And because of the ticket size that they operated in, normal ad agencies, which were, let's say, think of the travel agencies of the past, would only service ads of a certain ticket size. If the ad was, let's say, 500 rupee, 1,000 rupee ad, the cost of servicing the ad was far more expensive than the margin you make on the advertisement. Hence, no one was interested in servicing that. And that's where we saw an opportunity. We saw an opportunity for leveraging technology. We said, okay, can we make this process so simple that a consumer who wants to place an ad can self-serve himself through the platform, right? Aapko ad banana, you have to make your own ad. You have to compose it. You will choose your date. You will make the payment. And then we will process the ad into the publication. So when you decide to do that, the cost of servicing, because again, what is technology building in, right? Technology is bringing in efficiency into the process. So the same, what is the cost if a newspaper has to open an office in any district, and it has to have a person sitting on that desk 24/7 to be able to accept bookings, and he needs to take booking and calculate the cost. He needs to have a sufficient amount of booking to justify the expense of running that operation in that city, right? But with the beauty of technology, you could do it anywhere, right? And that's where we said, why don't we build out that platform? If MakeMyTrip could do it for travel, why shouldn't we do it for advertising? And the interesting part was, we were doing it in a sector which people consider dead. And that's the beauty, because as an entrepreneur, you want to make a hypothesis on things which are contrary to what people normally believe, but you need to be right. So our thesis was very simple. While newspapers are dying in the West, over time are declining, in India, I mean, especially 2008 and even now, it's like they're not dying anytime soon. India, the cost of newspapers is only 2 rupees, right? Literacy is growing in India. It is so widely distributed, and especially vernacular, that the strength of the newspaper, in the largest English newspaper in the world is in India now. The largest vernacular newspaper in the world is in India, right? So given it's not going anytime soon, why don't we build a service to make this process more efficient? And when other people think it's dead, you are innovating in a sector without much competition, right?
Good. Speaking of newspapers not being dead, in the office space that we have in Calcutta, below that, there is a board where every morning pages of the newspaper are stuck, and people stop while they are walking and read. And this happens till date. There is people at all hours stopping, like the newspaper might be 10 pages long. So there's like 5 boards or something which has the newspaper stuck on those.
Every page is stuck on a board for people to read, like cannot afford to buy the newspaper or they're walking on the way. By the way, at one point, because Calcutta was the early capital than Delhi, Calcutta had 30 newspapers. 30 newspapers operating out of Calcutta. Right? But we are talking about generations. Because media has evolved over time, right? Like, because we think of print, then we think of TV, now we think of OTT, we think of radio. It's evolved, but newspapers are there. And if you go to India 2, India 3, which like tier 2, tier 3 cities, because of vernacular being so strong, they're still very strong. Like that's not going anywhere.
I'll add something to the thought. So I grew up watching the morning 1 hour of time of my father being owned by a newspaper. Not even one, like I think 5 newspapers used to come home, right? Economic Times will come, Times of India, blah, blah, blah. But I don't consume newspapers, right? Do you believe that the consumer consuming the newspaper now does not consume higher ticket items? Because the people consuming higher ticket items are generally stuck to their phones or their laptops. And the second thought I have, if that is true, where is their attention that now you're trying to grab?
Interesting. So 2 things. See, if you notice, like you said, you've seen your father read the newspaper every hour in the morning, right? You built a habit. To be honest, a lot, and and newspaper is still very strong for that generation. It now maybe for me and for you, we are digital natives. So we have while a newspaper takes a day to publish the news, we are in this world of instant updates, right? Think of it like it happened now, and we get a notification. So we are in this real time process of always staying updated. The concept of news still remains. See, consumer behavior does not change. We like to be updated. We like to follow news. That will always remain. The question is the format it will be consumed in, right? Now, if your father, so the demographic which is consuming print is highly affluent because they are, let's think of it like a more older demographic. So think of now, because India became more affluent, our parents are fortunately more affluent than their earlier parents because India has done well, right? So if they've done well, and if you're, let's say, running a startup which is focusing on retirement services or taking care of adults, right, or taking care of any mutual funds for, let's say, asset management. So sure, that's your TG, which is also going to read the Economic Times. It'll also be reading the Times of India. So it's not either or, right? So the idea of always any form of marketing is you as a consumer do not exclusively expose yourself only to one form of media. You are watching TV, you might be in your car listening to Spotify or radio, you might be going online on Facebook and Instagram. These are all different types of media which you're consuming at any point of time. The question is that when do I reach you with what message at what time? So that does not change. So newspaper is still very affluent. But again, if you want to highlight, particularly for the ReleaseMyAd problem, which we ended up solving, it was not solving the ad for the front page or the half page or the back page of a newspaper, which anyways, by the way, if a Pepsi wants to give an ad for reaching out to those people, there are enough agencies looking to service Pepsi, right? But think of it as an individual. Many times you now, out of statutory reasons, need to give out an ad for certain cases. Let's say you change your name. So the government mandates that you put on an ad in a newspaper announcing that you've changed your name. Or if you want to buy some property, the government mandates that you take out a public notice to inform the public that you have purchased this property and no one has any objection to it. So those are statutory requirements. Now, given the government requires that, that's not going anywhere, right? So now why don't we make it that efficient? I'm not playing the game on will newspapers survive or not. My game is if newspapers will exist, and they're like an elephant. An elephant has a very slow, comfortable death. So, and for all that matters, when I started ReleaseMyAd in 2008, I was like, maybe even if it runs 10 years, it'll be great. But it's, by the way, it's 2024 now. And I still see that, like another 10 years down, won't be any supply.
Nothing is happening.
Yeah. Let's see, as human beings, this quote, I don't know, Bill Gates, we overestimate the short term and we underestimate the long term.
Yes, that guy Hormozy also says it, that we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in a decade.
Exactly. So with that thesis, the newspaper, our goal is to make that simpler. But that being said, to transition out, as in when you build any business, right? Once you keep on building efficiency, keep on building scale. As an entrepreneur, you always have this bug, which is like, what next, right? And like I said, before anyone cannibalizes you, what can you do for your business to make this the next level, right? Or what do you jump on to the next level for scaling? Because again, like I said, advertising has been my calling. While we enter into the newspaper space, the next journey, which was pretty evident, was how do we crack something in the digital domain? But digital is very interesting because, like I said, in the offline print, we built a marketplace. Marketplace required what? Fragmented supply, fragmented demand. In the online world, while we think we have fragmented supply, interestingly, 80% of all ad spends or all ad revenue accrues only between two players, which is basically Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, and Google. While you have many other places where you see ads, but all of revenue in terms of, people give brands putting out money or advertising is actually accruing to only two players. So there is really not a fragmented supply. Now the question could be asked, why is that the case, right? But even before that, so historically, as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, can I copy paste what has worked for me in one sector and let's move this with this working model into another form of medium? So we tried that. But to be honest, as an entrepreneur, you learn with your own mistakes. So we tried figuring out, okay, how about we build a marketplace aggregating all digital ad supply, right? Advertising on Spotify, advertising on YouTube, advertising on Facebook, build a marketplace for that. But then we realized, even when you did that, the supply where most people really wanted to advertise is very limited. It's not as fragmented as you think it to be. And digital advertising, the objective of people giving an ad is very different than the objective of people giving a newspaper advertisement. So in the case of digital advertising, my objective where digital advertising ended up really thriving was performance, which basically meant of all the money I spent in advertising, can I actually measure how much sale or revenue am I getting out of it? On the contrary, in newspaper ad, there's no measurement, there's no expectation, right? So it's actually a really different animal by itself. And that sort of, because of that expectation of performance is exactly why people like Google and Facebook actually won that game. They won that game because advertising online actually became a data business. And that's what we learned the hard way. It was not a problem of aggregating supply and aggregating demand. To be honest, we had demand. We have all the advertisers giving us ads, newspapers. It was very easy for us to convince them to say, why don't you advertise in Spotify? Why don't you advertise in Ghana? But even when they did that, the expectation of the response that they would get from the ad in terms of sales was not as measurable, or it was not comparable to the response that they would get from giving an ad in Instagram or measuring the ad from Google, right? And think about it. When you're searching something on Google and you end up clicking on an ad, you already have that intent, and I'm looking to buy that, right? So Google is able to harness that intent so easily, and hence you're able to give credit as an advertiser. Oh, Google has got me that customer, right? Because Google has aggregating the world's intent together. So that's where we saw an opportunity where if advertising is a data business and these guys are controlling data, which is basically making this space totally blank for everyone else to try to enter. So, for example, Times of India might have enough users watching timesofindia.com, or Ghana has enough people listening to Ghana or Spotify, right? But the ad revenue that they get commensurate to the number of users that they are having is not even comparable to what Google and Facebook can monetize per user. But yeah, we saw that opportunity to sort of capture them, and that's what I'm building now.
I think with any of these newspapers, or for example, like a Times of India or a Telegraph or whatever, you have a thing that, okay, your newspaper is reaching 50,000 people,
yes,
or 5 lakh people, whatever, arbitrary number. And you know that the advertisement is reaching so many people. It's creating so many, as now we can call it, impressions.
Yeah.
But how many people are actually seeing that, or how many people are clicking on it, or anything like that? You have no way of getting that data
for the newspaper.
Yeah, for the newspaper, because they're like, okay, one way to do it is you have a QR code that links it, or something like that. But yeah, it's again a much harder thing. Whereas Instagram and all gives you data like.
No, so two things. Very interesting point that you raised. See, historically, people haven't raised a question on print, which we are raising today, which is about measurability. Why is that the case? Because historically, you had one major newspaper, right? Think of it like from a TV channel. There was only one Doordarshan. So everyone who had to watch TV had to watch Doordarshan
on a national basis.
On national basis, or even a regional basis. Let's say if I'm in Calcutta, I have only one newspaper which is pretty much reaching everyone who's affluent or everyone who's literate, right? So given I am advertising in that newspaper, because I don't have, then you as a consumer don't have enough media options to even choose from to switch to. Think of a decade when there was no phone. Think of a decade when there was no PC, right? The print newspaper was your portal to the world, right? And at that time, because that was the only newspaper, even if you put out an ad, you knew you reached your target audience. Now, we are not in that world. We are in a world where the media is fragmented. We as a consumer have the option of 200 TV channels, a few million websites to even bother around, newspapers, radio stations, OTT applications, right? So we have hundreds of options. So we as a consumer, our attention, which was earlier concentrated on limited media, is now fragmented. Now, if we are fragmented, it is very critical to be able to measure what and when and who and how and why am I able to show the right ad to the right person. So then the question arises, is a newspaper as efficient as it was then versus now? Not really true, right? Because in the sense that at that time there was no competition. If I asked you this question, I don't know if I've grown up with this, washing powder Nirma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that. Washing powder Nirma. Imagine you remember the jungle. Why do you remember it?
Because you heard it so many times.
You heard so many times. Yes. How could you hear it so many times?
TV.
Because there was only limited TV channels which you were watching at that time. Everyone would watch Ramayana, Mahabharata. We had these limited options at that time. Yeah, so literally all of India was tuned in at the same channel at the same time. And because we were hammered with the same message over and over again, regardless of how great or amazing or average it is, we remember it, right? Now in this new age generation, because we are exposed to so many different ads, so many pressure. If I asked you how many ads you saw on Instagram yesterday, you'll have no answer. You'll have zero memory.
Every third or fourth thing you see on Instagram is an ad.
So to the point that you said, right? Now, though you can measure many things on digital, please understand what you're measuring today is also being reported to you by the platforms who are serving the advertisement. So they're not showing you all the metrics. So for example, that's where we saw as a very interesting opportunity of conflict. So historically, in the offline domain, there's a mediator like us, which is helping consumers decide where should they place an advertisement in a newspaper. If you want to go to Calcutta, Telegraph is the most important newspaper. Please give an ad here. If you want to go to Delhi, please show in the Sun Times, right? In the online world, so there's a media planner, which is helping you sort of evaluate. And then there's a media where the ad is actually coming out. In the online world, interestingly, where we are seeing the ad, which is the media, is also doing the decision of who to show the ad to, which is what we call the targeting. For example, when we go to Google or we go to Facebook, we say we want to put an ad on Facebook, and then we tell Facebook, okay, Facebook, my customer is males who are 35 to 45, who are affluent, who are living in this neighborhood. Can you show my ad to them, right? And then Facebook decides to show an ad to them. But interestingly, if you notice, when if you own the media and you are being asked to show the ad to as many people, to the specific set of people, you have an incentive to maximize, to not be as efficient. Does that make sense? So what do I mean by that again is that if I was Google and if someone came and told me, please show my ad to males who are 35 to 50 of this living in this neighborhood, not all of them are still going to be my customers. Which basically means that every time there is an opportunity for someone to do a better job to show my ad to less people, that is not really happening because I am controlling the media.
It's circular though. So if my platform does not give me enough return on how much money I'm putting in, for example, I put in $1 into marketing. If I'm not getting 4 or 5 out, I will switch to another platform. Wait. So you're going to say, Akhil, everyone is on Facebook and everybody is on Instagram. How are you going to get out of that ecosystem and get on another person's attention, right? For example, my father still reads the newspaper. So does your father, hopefully, right? If I'm to target my father, much better to do it on newspaper than do it on Instagram.
No, so 2 things. No, sure, not Instagram, but maybe you target your father on YouTube, for that matter.
So my thought is if Google and Facebook don't do a good job, there will come a third party who will.
No, they are not incentivized to do a good job.
Yes, that's very interesting point.
They are incentivized because if they don't do a good job, I will move to a third party.
So and so what you're saying is something called perfect competition. So if there is competition for them, then so they have all incentive to perform better than competition is what you're saying. If the moment they are not performing better than competition, we will switch to competition. But the question which then arises is, does that mean they're performing at their best?
Oh, they are not.
So here's the other part. The reason no competition exists for them in today's world is because advertising in today's world, because we are measuring return on investment, is so when you get return on your ad, it's only when you show your ad to less people, but more and more people are likely to buy it. So then I'm exposing myself to less people, but my ad is getting more and more customers, as opposed to, because if I expose my ad to more people and then never buy from me, I'm never getting any return on ad spend on it, right?
So I'll give you a good option to do that.
Yes.
Which I believe you are an option to do that, right? But yes, I'll give you one. So my father and my brother, they own a pillow manufacturing company in Canada. To sell pillows, one way would be to go on Instagram, start a pillow channel by their name, Chorus Homes. And after they start that channel, they start producing some content and then push it out to the likely people who are going to buy pillows. Somebody with a kid, probably 30 to 50, somebody who bought a house, right? Whatever real estate on, whatever that may be, right? Other direction is go to YouTube and find YouTubers who are for ASMR, like sleep content.
No, so let's understand this.
That becomes very specified
in both these cases. Yeah. So we have already reached that level where we are able to influence advertisements to people who have shown interest in these type of keywords or in these type of categories where we can try to identify. But let's understand, if you want to go further than that, interest does not necessarily equal to purchase. What do I mean by that? While we talked about Canada as an example, I mean, because I'm in India and as an India specialist, let's talk about India. India has around 1.2 billion people. Okay. And so when let's say we were the same pillow making company in India and we want to sort of decide to show ads to people who are redoing up their homes or building their homes, right? Now, if I were to sort of do a target market assessment, how many users in India India has 1.2 billion people. So how big is my target market, right? And let's say my target market, because I'm selling online, how many people actually exist online which can sort of make online purchases? So, yes,
2%,
yeah,
2%, 3%, 2%.
So actually, India has around 400 million active users on the internet. But like you correctly said, 2% of those users, by the way, 10 million, is what are the number of users which actually make D2C purchases, which is basically buying off our website. Now, this 2%, while we think looks tiny, if you want to just do a paddle, 10 million users is 2%. If 10 million is the size of California. It's not small by itself.
It's but of Canada.
Yeah. But if you look at the size of the India's population and the internet user base, is tiny. And 2 million, even if you were to sort of triangulate this, there have been multiple reports from a perspective of, for example, Netflix in India. It's 2.5 million subscribers. That's 25 lakhs. Credit user base in India. Everyone who has a credit card of a certain score decides to join credit. 5.5 million users. Zomato users at the time of IPO, people who ever bought from Zomato, that's 10 million, right? So here's the interesting part. While we can use keywords and categories to sort of channelize our ads, 80% or more of the time, we are actually showing our ads to people who might be interested in our products, but are unable to buy, especially in a country like India.
There's a YouTube channel on which tracking tech, maybe something like that. And that guy does phone reviews. And he has like 4 million, 5 million views per video. And the comment section is still watching phones that I can never afford.
Yeah, that has the most likes, by the way.
And it won't be a single comment. It'll be like...
Let's understand what happened in India. India, mein Jio aa gaya. Jio came in India. Internet pretty much became the cheapest in the world in India. To the point that we think internet is free. Everyone in India, regardless of income level, more and more will come online or is already online. Now, just because everyone's come online doesn't mean they actually have the income to buy online or buy anything, right? Because disposable income has not increased as much. It will increase over time as India becomes more and more affluent, but it's not as soon. Okay, India is very lopsided. We have this Pareto principle, 80-20. Here's 98-2. 98-2 is unreal. Like in a country like India, we have a very, very tiny consuming class.
Can you expand on the 98-2? What does that mean?
So the 2% of user base which we are talking about, 10 million users, are pretty much buying more than 90% of all online goods. So here's the interesting part. While Google and Facebook are giving all this, targeting options to us, even of those ads which are being served to people showing those interests, 80% of those impressions are still being delivered to people who are interested like in those phones, but are unable to buy, right? And if they're unable to buy, as an advertiser, when I'm paying for those impressions, I'm probably wasting that impression out. Like it's sort of, and here's the argument. This is where, and that's the argument of incentive. So if Google and Facebook, so by the way, like I said, because advertising data business, Google and Facebook have way more data than the Times of India or any other competition that exists out there. Hotstar doesn't know anything what you're buying, right? Because you're not telling Hotstar anything. Google and Facebook, because you're searching all the time, you're searching those things, they've built a very nice profile about you.
Hence, Hotstar has sold itself to Jio.
Well, yes, and Jio is hoping to sort of build a third ecosystem.
You probably saw that on a Real News of the Week. If you did not, please check out the short.
So yes, so Jio will also be another interesting player in this ecosystem, that being said. But that being said, so Facebook and Google already perform better than all competition, which is why they have aggregated all advertising spends. Even if they have not aggregated all attention, you still spend time on Hotstar, you still spend time on Spotify, but the ads you see on those platforms are not as relevant or for you to encourage you to make any form of purchase, as opposed to what's on Facebook or Instagram or on YouTube. Now, so hence, they have all incentive to perform better than competition, but they have no incentive to perform better than themselves. And that's where the argument is. Okay, if there was only 2% user base in India, and by the way, this is not just online. So if I talk about 10 million online, if I were to ask you to guess, this came out in the Bloom report recently, how many consuming households India exists? Like for India, like if I were to tell you how many families in India existed, which is anyone's target market for any consumer brand, what would be the size of that?
So I know that 10% of India is all that makes more than 12 lakh rupees a year.
Yeah, and Balki think about 12 lakh is little.
12 lakh is just like about survival. And
Yeah,
this
and
is
if
household.
you're building, it's household income. Right? So if you really
Be
a man,
1% or maybe lesser than 1%.
yeah, so no, so
Not bad, bad.
no, so
But it's there.
so 1%.
Well,
So if you talk about number of households, we talk number of, and each household is around 3 to 4 people, right? Interestingly, the Bloom report, and we should put that slide out.
Put that down to what, 300 million households.
Yeah, actually 30 million households. So only 30 million.
Uh,
30 million, 3 crore households.
3% of India.
30 million. Yeah, 30 million households really pretty much are all the consumer class. So अगर online से बाहर जाता हूँ, so people have the argument कि online is still, चलो, maybe I'm not savvy online. My father is not savvy online to make a purchase. Maybe he goes off to the local mall to make a purchase or a local store. That demographic is not more than 3 crores. So even again, we have any form of digital advertising we are ending up doing, it's still not as efficient as we think it is. Yes, you can track everything, but remember who's giving us this information? The same people which are charging you for impressions. They are charging you for the number of impressions that you are they're serving for your brand to their consumers who are watching their channel. So they have no incentive to perform better, and that's where the interesting insight came about. And again, as an entrepreneur, you raise the other question, which is like, okay, if only 10 million users really matter in India, if it's for online purchases, or 30 million households matter, that's finite. 10 million is 1 crore. So if there was a way to only identify the 1 crore user base in India, which really mattered, then everyone would really want to show ads to them, or not show ads to people outside of the demographic. And by that definition, we can actually improve it on ad spend. And then if there was a way to identify them, then we actually are able to do better ad serving than historically what we assume Facebook and Google to be capable of. And that's what we're building with Xpert.
Interestingly enough, exact conversation I was having with my dad today, that India has about 3 crore people who might be able to purchase stuff. Canada has a 3 crore population where 3 crore people might be able to buy or purchase stuff. And then the US will have 30 crore population, out of whom probably 27 crore are able to buy stuff online, offline, whatever. Right? How are you solving the problem of the Indian brand reaching the Indian market?
Okay.
How are you reaching the 1 crore?
Awesome. So the entire thesis was, like we said, advertising is a data business. So whoever has more data on the customer can show better relevant ads to the individual, and hence the likelihood of purchase is much more higher. Historically, Google and Facebook have monopolized that because everything about them, or our internet life, is revolving around these two platforms. What has happened around COVID and beyond is that now each business is also selling digitally to its customers. So what do I mean by that? Every time you make a purchase online through a website, you're giving your details as a consumer to the brand which is making the purchase. Or when you go to a particular store, when you, let's say, go to Decouple and you make a purchase, they ask you for a phone number. So they're sort of trying to understand from your phone number as a unique identity what purchases you have made, right? So the entire idea was, as brands, today we are all coming together and we're repeatedly paying money to Facebook and Google as platforms to say, find my customer, find my customer, find my customer. But the customer base is within the 2%, which is 10 million users. So if there was a way to connect everyone's customer base together, we are very easily able to identify who this top 2% is, if there was a way to connect them together. And if, because this consumer who is actually buying is not just buying from one brand. I'm buying shoes from here, I'm buying clothes from somewhere else, I'm buying fashion apparel somewhere else, I'm buying home and decor somewhere else, right? If there was a way to sort of connect my purchases across the entire internet as well as through offline stores, we have more data on the same customer. And ultimately, we literally need to only track, like I said, 30 million households or 10 million online users. And if we are able to identify that, everyone who's part of the network becomes better off. So that's what we decided to do with Xpert. And the idea is very simple. Think of Xpert like a Truecaller, right? We all, we've heard of Truecaller, this app we install on our phones for sort of two objectives. What are the two objectives?
Avoiding spam and knowing people's numbers.
So avoiding spam.
Avoiding spam for sure.
And then?
That's
knowing people's numbers, as in knowing who's calling me without saving.
Yeah. Like just...
and how does it work? How does it work? How does it know all this?
I give my data on my contact list, which gives his, you give yours, and I have all of...
Yeah, so we all build this centralized database.
Yeah.
Truecaller connects to all of us. We build the centralized database. And then whenever any call comes to the network, Truecaller is able to identify, oh, Vishwas is calling, pick it up, right? Or there's a spam call, don't pick it up, right? So in the event, anyone who uses Truecaller is able to identify unknown callers and avoid spam. But no one's contact list is shared with anyone else. So I have no access to your contact list, you have no access to my contact list, but we are all better off to eliminate spam calls or avoid unknown callers. Right?
You can't make outgoing calls to unknown people, but you can get incoming calls from unknown people and recognize that they might be.
No, you
So, and but I will not know who is saved on your phone list also. And your set of, let's assume,
like,
and
I don't know that Sharad's numbers come from your contact list,
yeah,
or you don't know that XYZ person's number has come from
exactly.
Y person's list.
And then the most important, and now apply that to customers, because like we said, right, if we are only targeting 10 million users, if there was a way to connect everyone's customer base together, we could literally know who is buying what. And then we could actually say, so anyone who uses Xpert is what we sort of decide to build around, is when you connect to Xpert, we understand who's buying from you. Then we understand within our network, what are they also buying? And then whenever any customer, we are able to sort of tell brands, okay, this is a serious customer, he has bought in the past, show him an ad. This is not a serious customer where he has no buying history in the network, don't show him an ad. And in that process, one, we're able to identify the top 2% which really matter, show an ad to, and then eliminate impressions to people who have no buying history. And everyone who uses Xpert becomes better off with better ad targeting.
So basically, Xpert is a way to improve your return on ad spend.
Yeah, so improve your return on ad spend through better ad targeting.
Yeah.
Think of it from a perspective of, so when you are a brand, you're running ads on Instagram, you're running ads on Google, Facebook, there are sort of three things which decide the success of your campaign. The first thing is your product. See, if you have a shit product, nothing's going to help you. So first fix your product, right? Once your product is sorted out, then there are only two things left. One is, who do I show my ad to? And what do I tell them? So one is, who do I show my ad to is basically targeting. The what do I tell them is the messaging, right? At Xpert, we are solving the targeting problem. It's basically, who do I show my ad to? Because again, India is so lopsided. And if I only want to show my ad to the top 2%, if I know them, I'd rather show my ad than to them again. Remember the Nirma detergent commercial, because you were repeatedly bombarded that commercial again and again. Yeah, but you remember what Nirma is, which is what we call as branding, right? If I asked you today, name a new detergent, which I'm sure you must you'll never remember. For simple reason, because we as human beings end up forgetting, right? Understandably, we are recalled multiple times, right? It's what as branding.
Think about it. Even today, you're watching a football, cricket match even more so, because cricket match has more ads in it. Even if you're watching it online, you are seeing the same ad.
Absolutely.
It's that Cred ad with Madhuri Dixit and Anil Kapoor, and when that whole series was running, you just heard the name of Cred.
No. So that is exactly what branding is. Branding is built by repetition. And interestingly, cricket, even till today, is one of those media options which is not yet fragmented, right? Because if I'm a cricket watcher, I'm going to watch over after over after over. And if I'm doing that, I'm repeatedly seeing that same commercial again and again, which is actually influencing me.
Yeah.
That same level of experience of branding or awareness of the commercial does not exist online as easily, right? Because when we do an ad online, it's like putting a bucket of water in an ocean. We don't know who is seeing the ad, how many times am I showing the ad to. And which is why any large brand, as then when they scale, all of them move to television. And all of them do IPL, they'll do any form of cricket. It's because that's where you can actually have unfiltered branding.
Oh, and again, you have repeated branding.
Yes. That's exactly. Branding is built by repetition.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we think we are doing branding, but nothing is really happening.
Yes. In Delhi, I'm sure you're on your way from the airport to here, you've noticed one company which has repeated its branding to you.
Don't say their name. Bhutani Infra, we will charge you.
I've seen that.
The number of times.
Yeah, so that happens, right? And so here's the thing, because we want to decouple ad targeting with media ownership. So I don't want Facebook to decide who to show my ad to. I want to show my ad on Facebook because consumers are on Facebook. I want to show my ad on Instagram because consumers are on Instagram. I want to show my ads onto YouTube because consumers are there. But I want to decide who in those user base to show my ad to. And that's what we want to build with Xpert.
And you want to be the deciding party rather than letting Facebook or Instagram or Google be the deciding party.
Because we feel there's a conflict of interest. Because if they were so efficient, they would be cannibalizing their own revenue. So if I ask you this question, why is Facebook not doing this? Why is Facebook not letting you? Because like you said, right, in the perfect world, if someone's better than Facebook, we will all go to someone else. But why is Facebook not letting you target the top 2% user base in India, which actually buy? Because we are all telling Facebook everything as brands. Why?
Facebook's listening to us right now. We don't need to tell them anything.
Even if they did, because the idea is Facebook and all Google are making money on impressions. They're an ad platform. They make money when they show ads to more and more people. If they only limit ads or allow advertisers to only target the people that actually matter, is only 2%, they will be cannibalizing 98% of the user base which use Facebook, but they're not monetizable as easily. on Facebook, on Google, on YouTube. The only difference is we just put in the data to show the ads to the right people within those platforms.
Is it more that the person showing the ad does not know how to use the ad platform optimally that you might be able to, which is more than Facebook is just not doing it automatically?
Yeah, so think of it like what is really going to happen over time is we all use ad platforms to give ads, but maybe we use an agency to help us create those ads, to help us optimize those ads, to help us serve those ads as brands, right? Or we use settings on the platform like Facebook to show my ad to those people who are searching this category. Now, what we are sort of building around is sort of the SaaS tool to be able to make that level of targeting or optimization much more simpler and much more easier because our incentives are aligned with improving your ad or your return on ad spend. Facebook has all incentive to keep your return on ad spend to as much as you are stuck to the platform. If it becomes any better, Facebook will lose revenue. Got it? And the second part was very interesting. As a business, when you build this, while we started Xpert with this fundamental idea that why don't we connect 10 million users across brands, what really came out of it was other like golden insights which we never thought were possible. So by aggregating a lot of this data, because now we've been powering this around for 500 plus brands, and we've been building Xpert around 8-9 months. And when we've been doing this, we've now gotten intelligence around locationally where people are living who are buying what. For example, even in a city like Bangalore, where are people who are buying things online and offline, where are they actually living? Because whenever you make a purchase, you give us your physical address for delivery. Which pockets matter, which societies matter, and using that intelligence, brands are able to do better targeting, not just through their online ads, but even to help them decide where should I open my next retail store. Because if I want to open up a physical store, if I want to be accessible for a touch and feel for my customer in Delhi, which is the right neighborhood to open up my store in first? That is a decision which can be made by data, not by intuition, right? Because it's expensive to open up a store. And you want to make that sure that if you are in the right location, automatically things fall in, right? Historically, so a lot of this data intelligence, which we earlier never realized, this opens up itself because you're now able to use that data to be able to make better predictions, even for offline expansion opportunities. So things like where to open up my store next, where should Bhutani open up his next hoarding, where his customers are actually living.
And every 100 meters.
If you think of from the airport, if you think of it, that's also strategically placed. So that being said, and the other aspect around this was when we started doing this, the other gold mine which really kicked out was that online buying is still a very small percentage of total retail spends. The other real elephant in the market is to drive footfalls or sales from stores. So historically, we all also make purchases from malls and we go to stores inside those malls. And people, which are brands, right, all open up stores within those multiple malls. And they don't do, by the way, anything to do to drive footfalls. They just open up a store in a mall which automatically attracts a lot of traffic. And because there's a lot of traffic coming into the mall, automatically some of that will trickle down into my store. Now, that being said, because we built a lot of this data intelligence first with online transactions, and we realized that this intelligence could also be leveraged for helping stores drive store footfalls and sales within their particular neighborhood. So if I am a store which I open up in Greater Kailash, should I target my ads to all people who are living in and around GK of a certain demographic who are likely to buy from me? And then I can actually measure of all the people who I showed my ad to, how many of them actually converted into sales within my store. So the entire level of efficiency, which we as a brand or a website can track online very easily, right? You can track a click versus a sale very easily because it's very controlled or collected, right, on the internet. Is that level of efficiency can we build for physical stores? And can we make marketing much more effective even offline, which we earlier taken for granted cannot be measured because if they're coming with the print mindset how can we measure it, right? And that's the level of energy which we realize we can build around Xpert, even for helping with offline brands to drive physical store and footfall. So that's pretty much what it is.
Sharad, let's remove the mist a little bit and let's talk about the customer journey. So I am someone new. I run a new store, maybe a physical store, maybe an online store. And I come to Xpert and I want your help and I have no idea about this online marketing business. It's pizzazz. So let's go. How does your company help me? What do I do?
Very simple. See, if you're an online store or an offline store, in some format, you are collecting some form of transactional data. Either if it's your own website, then whenever it's your Shopify, whenever a purchase is happening on your website, basically you are getting a detail of a customer making a purchase from you. But that's your own customer base, right? Even from a physical store perspective, whenever someone walks into your store and they buy something, we are all smart enough to try to collect their phone number at the time of purchase so that we can sort of try to remarket to them or message them wherever we have a next time offer in our store or to give them update on whatever new release we are having. So all brands today, it is commonplace for brands to build up their own first party data. And this is what we call as first party data, which is basically all my own transactions, which I'm aggregating from my website or from my outlets. Now that is good enough for me to get repeat purchases, but that's not good enough for me to get new customers who are very similar to these guys who are already buying from me. So now that's where Xpert comes in. So when you come to Xpert, either you have a store or you have an online website, we connect to your platform. So first we understand who's buying from you. Even if you have 100 customers, you have 1 million customers, it doesn't matter because we have brands of all sizes which you work with. But when we connect to your customer base, we first understand who is buying from you. Then we are able to identify the same customers who are buying from you. What are they buying from our other network of brands? Now, why is that important? Because this helps us understand what are other interests and purchasing behavior of the customers who buy from you across our network. So there are people who are buying from those other brands who are not buying from you, which are likely your future potential customers.
You're basically building a demographic based on their data.
Based on understanding from the data and
then you are extrapolating
across our network. And that's exactly the audience which we want to tell that you exist, because they are likely to buy from you, because they are customers who also bought from you, who also buy from those similar type of product categories. So very simple. To make it simpler, you come to Xpert. Either you're on an online store or you have a POS system, you connect to Xpert. We have a software sort of which integrates with that. Using that, we are able to sort of first give you this analysis of who's really buying from you. Because as a brand, we only know, okay, this person Vishwas bought from me or not. But I have no idea what Vishwas did the moment he stepped out of my store. But with Xpert is able to tell, oh, Vishwas has bought from store A, store B, store C. And not store names, but more like what product categories he bought, what is his interest. Based on his purchases, we can say, oh, Vishwas is a parent, Vishwas is interested in fitness, right? And then if you bought protein powder, don't worry. That's it.
Are you? Do I not know about your hidden strategy?
But that being said, so with that intelligence, we are able to build a lookalike audience of actual buyers. And that audience automatically gets pushed into your ad account. So whichever creative that you're running with your ads, you just replace that with an Xpert audience. And then you run that online for driving store footfall or for driving online sales.
Am I running the ads still by myself and you're giving me a file, or are you doing that running ads?
So you will be running the ads yourself. But the difference is the targeting. So when I say you run the ads yourself, means the creative will be done by you.
Okay.
The messaging is done by you. The audience, who to show the ad to, that is sort of a customer list, which we sort of encrypt and we automatically share to the ad platform. So you are able to use our list within your ad account to be able to target your ads to those people only.
Do you need my login credentials to be able to do that? Or?
So actually, no, so not login credentials, but basically we will also need your login credentials for us to monitor the performance. But that being said, the audience which we give out to you is only available for you to run ads on. You cannot download or export any of that data.
Yeah, so the file that you have given to me.
No file goes to you physically.
No file.
A file goes into the ad platform, which is Google or Instagram or Facebook, where that is available as a list for you. So you're like, okay, this is my potential customer.
I see it in a drop-down menu where there's like Xpert
customer target list. Please select this and select this creative and run my ad. That's it.
Awesome.
So they're basically the point where you go to select your audience.
Yes.
That is where Xpert is coming in.
Right. And one more thing, once you take the audience from us, and then you need to measure within the period of time for the amount of ads that I've run, did my spending of ads actually result in new customers? For example, what happens is the platform is all interested in showing you, it's all interested in something called over attribution, which basically means Google will say this customer came from me. Facebook will say this customer came from me because he clicked on this ad. Google will say he searched for this keyword. So every time you as a brand, you might have let's say you're getting 100 sales, but Facebook is reporting 85 sales. Google is reporting 40 sales. So that's 120, right? But you're like, oh, but I only got 100 sales. Where is that? So what is happening is both Facebook and Google are over attributing customers which they are claiming came from them, as opposed to maybe it's a mix of the two, or even otherwise. So you as the brand need to know where did the customer actually come from. right? Or which platform is actually driving new customers. So we built the attribution engine, which is basically the fact that once we run the ads for targeting, how many of those customers which we targeted actually end up buying from us? What is our actual return on ad spend? As opposed to what the platform is showing. Because again, the platform has an incentive to maximize its return on ad spend or show that to you, because that's when you think the platform is most effective and you spend up more money on the platform.
To inflate the numbers, basically.
Well, yeah, well, in some ways, right? Like it's
As much as possible. So, like, there is
not an incentive, but the idea is
good. So,
Yeah.
I play a lot of golf. So, there's this thing with when you go and there's this whole trend of simulators, golf simulators, where you go and hit the ball against a screen, and there is a projector or something like that which is tracking the speed at which you hit the ball, and it's giving you a distance. So they say a lot of these projectors or a lot of these simulators oftentimes juice your yardages up, because keep going back to them and you're going to reuse their services from time to time. So they show you a longer yardage than you've actually hit.
it's always a conflict of interest unless until there's some third party which has no incentive in like reporting you the actual truth is able to do that. Right?
Because you're not seeing the thing actually happen, right? You're not,
And
you're not seeing the ball land at a certain distance.
That's exactly what it is. And so, and what is even interesting is, as a physical store, if you were to try to do the math, which is saying, okay, I spent a few thousand rupees in my advertising to drive my store, how much of that actually converted into sales within my store? There's no measurement for it because it's broken. The experience is not, one is showing digital ads, the experience is happening offline even over a period of like between 2 to 3 months. It's not immediate that I see an ad and I make a purchase. So how do you connect the two? And that's what we are building to think of it like, because that's where we see it's like a blue ocean, where we actually, while we started, and we always do online, because that's also is one of the channels where you as a brand will sell, we want to be omni-channel. But we want to sort of approach this from a perspective of helping brands do better marketing and decouple platforms from targeting.
I'll add a thought. So in India, in my opinion, there are 3 different types of business. One is a business which is mature, understands P&L, understands the terms, understands what EBITDA means. Then number 2 is a startup who's very tech savvy but never made money and like still in the air thinking about what am I going to do. The third is a dhanda. And the dhanda is basically I'm going to buy stuff and I'm going to sell it more expensive. As long as I get money in my pocket at the end of the day, all good. Are you only for startups, only for businesses, or are you also for dhandas? And why I ask that is because when you go to a dhanda, and I come from a city called Panipat, it's very close by from Delhi, and primarily there are dhandas, right? They will not care about what was my conversion, what was my ROAS. They will be like, हमने तुम्हें दे दिया है, अब तुम चला देना और मेरे पास पैसा बढ़ जाए.
See, because again, as a startup, you want to not serve every customer on day zero. You again want to build your niche, offer a certain type of customer, over deliver on that segment before you expand to other segments. So how we've sort of broken our segmentation is very clearly, first, make life easy for people who are already doing this and already measuring a return on ad spend, because that's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, right? Because if you already have your metrics in place, I need to sort of do better than whatever you are delivering on today, right? And I can sort of prove that to you with, let's say, just by replacing an audience with what you are running. Once we capture that, is what we have. By the way, that's how we started, because that's the smallest base of consumers, which you, like, for us customers, which you can sort of validate this thing on. And once you win that market or you build a beachhead on that market, then you expand a little outwards. So now, because our next set of expansion was not just online brands, but brands which are actually selling through physical stores.
They are primarily dhanda people.
Yeah, so dhanda people do hote. So one are resellers, one are brand owners. So think of it from a perspective of, again, because we are very fundamentally data business, and we think of it like Tanishq will have 100 stores, actually 360 stores all over India, or Titan I Plus, or for that matter, any local fashion designer which is selling from their own retail outlet. You need to have your own store, because it's your own store, you are collecting your customer information. If you were selling through a marketplace, let's say you're selling to Spencer's or you're selling through Shopper Stop, the data of the customer is not coming through you. So you have no idea of who's actually making a purchase, right? You're not direct to customer yet. You're still going through a channel like an Amazon or a Shopper Stop. So if you're an employee-owned store or you're a franchisee-owned, but employee, so brand operated, that's the next set of segments we are capturing beyond. And once we cover that, is if you're a reseller, sure. But to be honest, it's already a very, very large market to be able to sort of get there. And our other goal is, again, you as an entrepreneur have moonshots. Our moonshot is because we've already aggregated of the 10 million which we target had, we already aggregated 6 million, and now we keep on getting more brands. Our network becomes larger. We get more data on the same person. We feel that once we capture our 30 million households or 10 million online users, we want to leverage this data to make advertising efficient, not just on Facebook, Google. We want to democratize advertising to make advertising easily targetable for Hotstar, for Spotify, for Ghana, for all those other platforms which were devoid of consumer data to do better ad targeting, where the money was actually being transferred to Google and Facebook. And that's why we see hopefully our lives calling. And that's what you see, right? Like that's the marketplace we can build. But if you notice, from ReleaseMyAd, we did build a marketplace. Xpert is also a marketplace, but the difference is it's built structurally around leveraging data as the enabler and sort of the oil, which is connecting all of those joints, as opposed to your fragmentation of supply.
So you're saying in 9 months, you've gotten 500 D2C brands on your platform, and you have data for 6 million out of the 10 million customers?
Yeah, 6 million we've already mapped, and multiple transactions across the 6 million, not just one, right? But the very interesting part here is, to be honest, we started Xpert because I think whoever's watching this will have this first question: how? I mean, sure, in your head you'll have this question. We started Xpert as an experiment during COVID, and the experiment was not about building an online ad platform or trying to revolutionize advertising. It was an experiment to say, at this COVID, you have this, like your introspective thoughts. So I said, let's build an online school, because I'm in the world of marketing advertising. We said, why don't we build a school where we actually get the top marketing heads in India to come and teach to founders, because founders need to get marketing right, especially founders of digital first brands, because say Mama, Abode, these are all digital first brands. Now brands are born digitally first and then they go offline second. But founders need to build the marketing muscle to be able to build a successful brand online. During COVID, because I had this network with ReleaseMyAd, we said, why don't we get marketers to come and teach who are actual practitioners, not academicians, but practitioners who have been doing this by learning, and can we teach what they have learned as a framework. And during COVID, we ran these as cohorts over, so we ran over 6 cohorts. Each cohort was around 80, 90 brands, and only founders. Founders would be students, marketing heads would be teachers. And in that journey, we built a community. We built a community of pretty much founders of brands who, in addition to learning from marketing heads of what did Boat get right, which I can apply to my company. What did Vada, which is like a tea brand, get right, which I can apply to my company in scaling on Amazon or something, right? Each of those things were a module. But interestingly, when we put all of these founders together in a WhatsApp group together, all of them started helping each other. They started helping each other beyond even the program. And you as a founder, you're like literally your target audience is talking to each other and you're hearing their problems. And what is the number one problem? The number one problem was, I've grown well on Facebook, but I'm unable to grow further because every time I spend more and more money, it's becoming more and more expensive to acquire new customers. And then everyone has the same argument that I can grow to a certain extent, but beyond that, I'm hitting a ceiling. And that leads you to question why. And that's when we discovered, because India only has 10 million users online which are being purchased. And why are we all fighting and trying to hope Google gets us, Google God comes and gives us those customers, as opposed to why can't we connect all of us? And because we built a school together, we actually had the trust in place for brands to sign up, say, okay, I'm in. Because you can see all the other founders already in the platform as part of the network. And that's how the idea of Xpert came about. So it was never, it was not an accident. It was literally, as a founder, you take it step by step.
I guess that's how it works now with founders, that you don't really have your idea A doesn't always pan out the way you're thinking about it. You have to also
see, obviously, very cliche, follow your passion, but the idea is like keep your ears,
keep your eyes and ears open, yeah.
And you realize what you build as value. Well, I honestly didn't Xpert as a school because I wanted to learn. I had no other intention. ReleaseMyAd already does very well. So I had no intention beyond that, but I realized because I built so much trust, this was an amazing way for me to encash that, to build out a solution which otherwise would be impossible to build. So if I came and told you on day 0, come and share your customer data with me in some fashion, even if I'll not, encrypt it, I'll do everything else. So like, also, how big is your network? Who are you? Yeah, who are you?
Exactly. Why should I share my data with you?
And that chicken and egg problem is exactly how we solve with our community.
I think that biggest thing you see even now, like any app you download on your phone, at least for the iPhone, keeps asking you, allow this app to track your
Yeah.
thing. So that
By
they
the way,
can-
by default, 97% of people say don't.
yeah.
And
Oh, really?
yes.
That's
And that's Apple's privacy thing, which which is why. And again, this is also where you as a founder realize how to build trends where like things are moving towards. So we are going to move to a world where this anonymous form of tracking will be eliminated. So all these cookies which Google Chrome is now sunsetting will be removed. So any form of targeting which has historically worked on the internet is going to phase out. Now, because Apple has also instituted no app tracking transparency. So the ATT is what it's called, where you are asked every time you download an app on an iPhone, do you want this app to track you across all other apps? And you say no. So this app is not able to get more data outside of your behavior because that was anonymously being tracked. So any form of data which is left now will only be what brands have themselves acquired through transactions. And that's where, but you cannot, earlier it was a cookie. So we would never know who Vishwat is, but that same cookie would be identified on some other website. And then, okay, because Vishwat went to this website, let's show him an ad about this website also. That is all going away. But now, the only way to form, but that doesn't mean targeting is going away. That does not mean ads will not be relevant. That does not mean ads will not be targeted. Our bet is, because this is all happening, the only form of data which is actually connecting online and offline and between brands is your unique phone number with the transaction information. And your unique phone number is not really changing anytime. And if that's the way we can sort of stitch you as a profile throughout, you are a sum of your purchases. Your sum of your purchases will help us understand exactly who you are and what you like. And that will help us serve ads. And we feel we can build that intelligence around.
So there's a very interesting thought.
Yeah.
That the next evolution of India will be when the Louis Vuittons and the Ferraris and the very high ticket, very high value brands can actually come out of India. And there can be very heavy, high ticket exports from India, which has not happened yet. And that may be a discussion for the next time you're here, that are you going to enable Indian brands to do that?
One day, I'm not sure. Today we have enough of a problem in India to solve. But yes, absolutely. India will have international brands coming. Sabyasachi would be the number one, my bet, on brands from India taking over the world.
Still targeting the Indian immigration there, though, which is
You'll be surprised. Becoming better and better. Worked off Goodman there. Especially his jewelry line is now far more superior than his apparel line. So surprisingly. But that being said, see, this is all the function of, which is also the narrative, which is politically that, we are so proud of our culture. We're so proud of our heritage that we will be exporting this out to the world. So you will see things out of India which will be world class, and the world will want us, right? Because we are proud to be Indians. We are
every sixth person in the world is an Indian.
I forget that. We are like in the best time in India, the best time to build in India, and the world wants us. We are a growing country. Everyone else will go into a recession. A lot of them.
Sharad, we hope we were able to educate like lots of different brands about your existence, and hopefully they can come to your company and you can help them sell a lot more than they have. We have a tradition on this podcast. Our last guest has left you a question, and we would like you to leave a question for the next guest, not knowing who they are. We actually have two questions for a change. So the first question we have for you is, what do you do when the plan doesn't work out for the day? And the second question we have is, what factors influence the problems that you want to solve today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now?
It's wrong to assume anything can be finished in one day. Is the first expectation. Like, at least how I plan myself is like I have a to-do list. And I have a to-do list literally for what I'm supposed to do today. And then for whatever, there's this joy of scratching out of a to-do list when you're able to achieve them. And for what that does not happen, you move it to the next day, right? Now, when you say plan does not work out for the day, it's not about plan working or not. You will always find things which will work and which will not work. The question is always, why did it not work? What can I understand and learn from that failure or success to be able to make my next hypothesis only stronger, right? Because the journey of being an entrepreneur is you are a lifelong learner. And a lifelong learning only happens when you're humble to say you know nothing and you're willing to keep on learning as you go, right? So that's the version of basically when a plan does not work out. I mean, it's not about working out or not. It's about, did you learn from it? And did you build on top of it, right? And if you did that, right, you did what you were supposed to. No one will say that I will be right on day 0 and day 20 every day, right? Well, see, you should be wrong and you will have more learning from failure than success. See, today and tomorrow it's always around, because you're a startup, you're always in dire straits around making the 0 to 1 journey is all about making things viable. And when I say viable means You have a hypothesis, you validate, you have enough people paying you money for it, you are sustainable, and then you are able to step the pedal on growth. I have a working formula, now let me multiply it into 10, right? Till I get a working formula, the journey of today and tomorrow's problems all about what gets me to that situation. So anything which is a distraction, and to be honest, it could also be a broadcast, right? Or going to a exhibition or anything else, right? Like when you're going to a conference for that matter. If you have not figured out your product right, you should invest time in your product and talk to your customers. No other argument. Everything else is a distraction.
Yep.
So when you want to prioritize, you literally prioritize whatever will get you to 0 to 1 and be honest about it, right? There are a lot of good things which we think, oh, this is also nice to do, but if it's not going to affect what your objective is, please be rational enough to call it out. That's different day 2. 10 years is basically what is driving you, because what is driving you is literally the story that you're telling to every employee who's joining in your dream with you. So you need to, again, this is quote in entrepreneurship that, you're always like a telescope, you're a microscope and a telescope hand in hand. So your one day is all about micromanaging, right? Like every day, kya karne ka hai? But telescope is a 10-year. 10-year, we need to be here. This is what we are going to change. This is what we're building against. I mean, if I told you, like I said, when I started with this, I'm out to redefine advertising in its own new way and trying to break an oligopoly, which we normally think is part of the norm, you might just think how. But, and that's the little micro steps you want to take.